What's architecture really about? Archispeak is the show that dares to peek under the architectural kimono, exposing what architecture really is, what it is that architects really do, and to show you why we're passionate about our chosen profession. I'm Cormac Phelan. Join Neil Pan, Evan Troxel, and me as we have a casual conversation about all things architecture, which includes all the stuff people don't talk about. Think you already know what architecture is really about? Tune in and find out. It's time for some Archispeak. U.S. Census Bureau, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development had posted the housing starts, new residential construction in January 2013 is up 1.5%, which basically that equates to single-family authorizations were at a rate of 584,000 for the month of January. That's actually a pretty good indicator that, at least in the housing, both with the indicator that was released today, that unemployment dropped to
7.7%. Unemployment was announced this week to have dropped, and 236,000 jobs were added to our economy.
And with housing starts moving up, that's a good indicator, at least in the immediate future, that the economy's getting better. It's healing, and hopefully that starts to translate over to us.
Well, I've noticed just since this year, that inquiries are going way up. I've had a couple more calls than I normally get, and then recently I was asked to help out on a project for about 6 weeks, which was submitted this week. And the downside of that was it was a temporary thing. So once the project was into the city for approval, they didn't need me anymore. So I'm back, looking for my own work, and I was actually just contacted by somebody else about another little project. So it seems that things are picking up this year. I think for the first time, really almost 4 years, we've had like 3-4 years of pretty down news. There seemed to be this wave of, starting in 2008 and 9 of, wow, things are getting bad. And wow, they're really getting bad, but they'll probably be okay in another 12 to 18 months. And the 12 to 18 months rolls through, and it was like, wow, things are really getting bad, and they're getting worse. And there just seemed to be no real positive news. Even all of last year seemed to be a relatively stagnant year for a lot of people. I've heard from other people, from a few that have said, 2012 was a good year for them. But I think for many of us, 2012 was just kind of stagnant, at least not getting worse, but not getting better. And it seems the beginning of this year is getting better.
Yeah, I know in California, the architectural unemployment rate, I think, was at 13.9%. I believe it's the highest in the state for that segment of the building industry. And so, as graduates are coming out of school really soon here, there's not a lot to look forward to. I know there hasn't been in the last couple of years, but the other thing that we're running into in our office is, this new high school that I'm working on, is that as we're doing cost estimates for it, there's been some really huge jumps in commodities prices. And so a lot of people are really nervous, even though there isn't a lot of building going on. It's just that the cost of materials is going way up, and the funny thing was, no one really knows why yet. I mean, they're obviously looking into it, but man, that's kind of a scary thing, because just when employment, like you guys are talking about, is starting to pick back up, if they're not going to be able to build the stuff that people have been working on, then it's gonna hit again just as hard because no one's going to be able to afford it.
Well, I've noticed over here on our coast that the bid prices have been coming in pretty consistent, and they've stayed, I'd probably say for the past 3 years, they've stayed pretty consistent in lower than we expected, but still kind of in the average range. I'm trying to explain, figure out how to explain it. But it hasn't like spiked like it, did early on in like the 2005, 2006 range where, you were getting, we had a huge spike in the per square footage cost. When it started to dump, we were noticing, especially like, doing public schools and stuff, that it started to come back down to more, I won't say more like the 2001, 2, and 3 range, but it started to kind of, everybody was getting very hungry and they were, fighting over the jobs. So they, the prices were pretty competitive. And, I even heard of contractors going in with 0% profit just to get the job. Now that scares me often because when they're doing things like that, that they're scouring the documents or, something for change orders. They're spending more time on, this is purely, speculative opinion here, but spending more time looking at the documents for potential change orders than they are looking at the documents for what did they actually say, which I've had a few occurrences with that, and that's the reason why I bring it up. But 2011 for us was a pretty scary year. 2012, it was stable with, minor growth. But 2013 so far, we've been doing a lot of responding to, RFQs, RFPs. We've been going out and doing a lot of marketing. We've been submitting qualifications for a lot of jobs. And it almost seems as if we've done as many submittals for new work than we, in the first 3 months of, 2.5 months actually, as we have almost all of last year, which is promising for it. Now, everybody's still, the blood's in the water and everybody's still going after every one of these projects, but, it looks to be a better year than it was last year for sure.
What do you guys see from your firm's perspectives on employment and maybe hire? What have you guys seen over the last 2 or 3 years, and then in the first quarter this year, or almost the first quarter? What are your firms looking at for the rest of this year? Are you seeing an improvement and maybe hiring people? I'm sure the students that might be listening to this are thinking, okay, I'm going to graduate in May or June. Will there be some jobs out there? And is this pickup that we're seeing in January and February this year going to translate into maybe hiring somebody in this summer?
Well, we've gone to job fairs every year, even if we aren't hiring, just to keep awareness of the firm in people's minds. And we're really honest and just say, we aren't hiring right now, but we still want to see your work. We want to get people in the queue because we want to hire the best people, no doubt about it. But I know that everybody's still really tentative, and they're just, it's really flat. And I don't think people are really forecasting any possible growth until the middle of the year at the earliest. We are getting busier. But I don't think that the firm is in a place where they can make a commitment to people to start now. I just don't think that there is enough confidence in what's happening. I mean, not only is there no confidence because of what we've just been through, but I think it's going to have to kind of prove itself for a little bit, our economy, before people are really willing to jump back in and start hiring. But I tell you, the people who are still employed are doing 150% of the work. I mean, it's a lot of extra work right now.
Yeah, we've kind of done the same thing. Now, I've only been with the firm that I work with now 4 years, working on my 5th year, and um, we've, I've was when I was first hired, every seat in the house was filled,
Yep.
and that was. And then I started to slowly see our numbers dwindle when the projects were, tightening up or things were going on the shelf. And we aren't back to full capacity. We did lose, kind of like the middle of the road folks, and we have hired in their place. We've hired people, like fresh out of college. A lot of that's, we've got manpower, but we don't quite have the full run of experience. But yeah, the more seasoned people, the project managers, the more senior project architects and stuff, they are probably just overflowing with just the bulk of having to work, having to kind of like break in the recent graduates and stuff, and do a lot of extra work and a lot of the heavier lifting to make sure that we kind of at least maintain the quality that we're known for throughout the life of the project. But yeah, we've done the same thing as what Evan was talking about, is that we've basically just kind of held steady. We don't want to really hire any more people, not yet, not till we absolutely necessarily have to. I mean, if we can overload everybody to like maybe 120% of the workload rather than just the normal 100%, yeah, so be it. But yeah, I think we've really kind of held off on doing any of the hiring. But in turn, though, a lot of the people that we've been hiring, when we do hire, are recent graduates. So there are, and I've heard throughout several of the different firms around our area, because we've got a couple of different, we've got Virginia Tech, Maryland, Penn State, so we've got a lot of these regional architecture schools that that are putting out some really good quality students, and we're we've been snapping them up, or at least getting them in for seasonal internship and things like that, which works out great for the intern, because if we're at least willing to kind of bring them in for a semester's worth of work, they've got something to go on their resume. So they're not going to the next firm, or they're not out there with just a fresh face and nothing on their resume except for a part-time job at Quiznos.
Yeah. No, every firm should have interns all the time, if possible. I know a lot of the students don't even want to think about working when they're in studio, but as soon as they're out, you got to get out there and get working in a firm, because these firms should be helping develop these students and getting them in there and getting exposure and all these different things that they can do in the firm. It's a great exchange that happens between.
Well,
everybody.
That actually leads me to a question that I've had. What's the responsibility between the profession and the architectural education about getting students, crafting the curriculum to getting students out of the studio and into the office to learn real world practice of things? Because, and we've talked about this early on about recent graduates, and what do they really bring to the table if they don't have any practical office experience? And you've got doctors and lawyers, and even the building construction construction management side of things, that they push for internships and things like that throughout their educational process to prepare these kids for hitting the ground running the day they graduate. Whereas I'm really good at Prismacolors, and I can lay out a board really well, but I don't know how to detail a building and things like that. So I don't want to get off on that tangent, but I almost want to, make a plea to any student who's listening, make it an effort to get out there and get practical experience during. If you have to take a summer, if you have to work the summers in an office, if you have to take a semester off, do it to make yourself more marketable. Because, when I was graduating, now I was a little bit different case scenario here where I'd gone to school for 4 years, ran out of money, had to basically quit school for a while to get a job. I ended up going and working for an architecture firm for 4 years before I went back to school. And so when I was graduating, I had a whole lot of experience. And so I was a lot more marketable. But even before then, I was, working at an architecture firm, doing drafting, doing whatever it was that they wanted me to do so that I could understand the profession that I was getting into. And it made me more marketable. Because when I quit school and I was, 4-year kid, kid who only didn't finish school but had a lot of experience, they actually hired me over recent graduates because I actually was worth something to them.
Yeah, I think that your plea is a good one, and I also think that if you're between years, go and work a construction job if you can. Like that's how you learn how to put things together.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because you can always come back to a desk job, but when you get out of school, it's going to be harder for you who wants to be an architect to go work in the building industry as a construction worker. But that's the best experience you can get.
I totally agree with you because before I was hired on in the architecture firm that I worked for, I actually interviewed with a firm. They liked me, but they were moving they were getting ready to basically move offices and didn't really want to bring anybody on. And so they basically said, well, we want you on board, but it's going to be a few months. And so, here's a kid, has no job, and needs, money to pay bills and things like that. I went and took a roofing job and, worked on a roofing crew for 5 months in the hot summer of Florida. And, but I'll tell you what, one of the things that I know most about in detailing is how to detail the living bejesus out of a flat roof.
Yep. Yeah, that's, and even just the construction that I've taken on myself on my house, I mean, it just teaches you so much. And I've learned everything that I never want to do. But you do learn how these things go together. And I can tell you when you're actually in an office, it makes all the difference between you and that person who's going to get laid off.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a great thing about, and I don't know how it was with some of your classes and when you guys were back in school, but Auburn, we have the rural studio, and one of the things that the rural studio teaches you, when you're out there, you're designing, you're doing a design build, and whatever you put on paper, you're going to be putting in the air and hammering, things together and stuff. And you need to understand the translation between, the scribbles on the paper and, the beams in the air and stuff like that. And that's what I thought was a really great idea with what Auburn was doing is that, they were giving people hands-on practical experience on how to go from design to build and really understand what they're doing. And I thought it was great because then when you graduate and get out of school, you actually know what those lines on the paper actually mean.
Yeah, and you brought it up, I think, last episode where you were talking about Unity Chapel, right? How the set of drawings was like, I don't know, 30 sheets or whatever. And that's why, I mean, the greatest thing about that I've experienced with design build, I did design build for a few years with a partner, and we did everything. We would draw it, we'd go out in the shop, and we'd make it. And I learned how to weld, and we learned all kinds of really great fabrication. And the cool thing I think about it is that you don't have to do the most detailed drawings because you can figure a lot of stuff out in the shop. And you can sketch something and then go make it. And you don't have to lay out everything to the nth detail to get it built the way you want it by somebody who you probably don't trust to build it the way you want it. So I think that hands-on experience is, not only is it great just because you get to understand that stuff really well and you can draw it so that someone else can build it. But that experience of drawing it enough so that you know what you want to accomplish and then actually going and making it yourself will help get you there a lot faster.
And you said it really, really well, is that you don't really necessarily have to detail it out, but you need to draw it up enough where you know what the intent is.
Yeah.
But then when you take that and actually build it, then you can reverse translate that back to the drawing and say, okay, now I know what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
And that's a valuable tool. I've learned that's an extraordinarily valuable tool during the value engineering period of things, because we all have experienced, value engineering. And when we get to a point where it's just like, well, it's just really, really tough to detail. If you don't know how to detail it, and you're going to just go off of, a contractor or, a different tradesman saying that it's really hard to detail, you'll say, yeah, well, you're right. Well, let's go ahead and change it to something easier, which then diminishes your design. But if you actually know how to detail it and, build it, then you're actually coming to the conversation with enough knowledge to be able to defend your design and work with them to possibly make it easier, but maintain the design intent that you wanted to, which, is something that a lot of people who don't leave the office during that period of time, during the value engineering win, sometimes you actually do have to kind of strip it down and make it a little bit easier. They kind of give away the farm and not make the the design is completely different.
Let me ask you guys a question, because in my experience, Cormac, a little like yours, but unlike yours, I started working in an office in junior college right out of high school, and I found, similar to you, that having that practical experience helped me get jobs early on that other people coming maybe right out of school, and I worked during school, that other kids had a harder time getting, because I did have that practical experience and could kind of jump right in and be useful, and they didn't really have to teach me too much to be useful. But what I found was, having that experience for about 3 years or so through junior college, and then going on to college at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, was that I sometimes, and maybe it was just me, but when we were doing some design classes, I noticed some of my fellow students or classmates were, they were being very creative and doing things that just, completely unrealistic and couldn't be done, mainly because they didn't know any better. It's design. You're there to have, do whatever. And sometimes I found it almost a hindrance for myself, because as I was designing something, I was like, okay, well, how does that stand up? And, what would that be framed out of? Or how could you do that?
Does
and
this
I
door
found
have
that
panic hardware?
Well, not quite like that, but I mean, to a certain extent, yeah, it's it was like, I can't do that, so I'm not going to design it that way. Where I had classmates that were, designing things that looked like they needed sky hooks for, and so anyway,
and that's when you can do that kind of stuff, right, in school.
Well, absolutely, yeah, you can do it in school, but I found that sometimes I wasn't being as creative or out there as some of my fellow classmates were, because I did have more practical experience in my background.
Yeah, I totally see that happen, and I it is that is a tough thing to deal with, I think, because you get the really practical students, and then you get the really pie in the sky students, and then you never know who you're going to get on a jury when you're presenting. My comment about the panic hardware was, that was a question that somebody asked me. Well, how are you going to secure this building? And you're a second year design student, and you're presenting something interesting and thought-provoking, and then somebody grounds you in a second and says, well, this will never work because of this, and this, and it's real practical stuff. And not only were you not thinking in that vein, but your instructors weren't leading you in that vein either. And so it kind of never comes up sometimes.
Well, and actually, Delia, it's funny that you say that, because I actually started school kind of as a pie in the sky. I transferred in from, another university to Auburn. I was an art, visual arts student. I wanted to draw the pretty, fun things and just, make it as crazy as possible. Did that, through the first, few years. When I left school, I went to work and I came back, I was a completely different person. I was, somebody's like, well, you're not really stretching the design a lot. I was like, yeah, but I can build this. And I can detail it out, and I can make it stand, and I can secure those doors, and here's the panic hardware, and here's this and this and this. And it was just, it does, experience does actually kind of change your focus, but in a way, not to stray too far from the topic, but in a way, that's exactly what we should be wanting and demanding out of architectural education is, having them, we want them to try to learn and express their design and understand things, but we also need to teach them the rules, because, sorry, student listeners out there, when you graduate, you have got a whole boatload of rules to follow. And we never are void or far away from that set of rules, whether it's as we were talking last time, the graphic standards and how we detail things out, or it's the specifications, or it's the, codes, or it's this, or it's that, it's, all these kit of parts really have to go together as, a set of rules of how we build and design things. It shouldn't be the driver that, limits us, but it's always something that in a seasoned designer and architect will always have in the back of their mind, where is the panic hardware, or how will I secure this, and things like that.
I think that the analogy here is kind of like, it's like watching a pro athlete, right? I think when you see a designer who thinks way outside the box in the early stages of design and changes the rules or defies the rules or just doesn't give a crap about the rules, that's where innovation happens in architecture, and we do have quite a few architects innovating. But when it comes down to actually getting the building built, you have to follow all those rules because, codes and, you're talking about rules. That's what you're talking about. You're talking about the code. And so I think that you're absolutely right. And my analogy with the pro athlete is they make it look easy. You have no idea how hard it is to do what Michael Jordan can do. Or I do know how hard it is because I can't do it myself. But that's the same thing when it comes to really great architects too, is they make it look easy. Because they have all that stuff in the back of their mind the whole time, and they know how to put these things together.
Well, yeah, and when I'm saying that you're going to be living by a set of rules, that's just the basic code, your code knowledge and all of that other stuff. That's just the underlying factor of every single solitary building, whether it's the most innovated or the most sterile.
Right.
And it's just it's just a matter of the fact. And by no I'm trying to think of, when you said it, I was trying to think of this quote that my first boss used to say, and it was basically that the code is it's the God, I wish I really could remember it. Basically, it was if you design to the code, you're basically designing the best mediocre building you can. And that's and by no means am I saying that. I mean, any of these people who are the most innovative, Starchitects, if we want to call them that, which is a term I can't stand, but and we'll talk about that later. But it's just when you're going to design, with the code in mind, you can take it, you can stretch it, you can make it pliable, and you can do whatever you want with it. Just know that there's those basic life safety rules that's our Hippocratic Oath, life safety first. And then everything else we can kind of mold and apply and push to ourselves, as long as we've got buy-in from the people who are going to give us the stamp on our permit set. And
I would even add a couple words to that, and it is you can interpret it and you can argue it, and that is where you can get the malleability that you're talking about out of it.
Yeah, and but you need to know and have a working knowledge of the code, the rules.
If you don't, that'll never happen.
Before you can break, exactly. Before you can break them, you have to know them.
That's true.
So, I mean, that brings up a question for me. And since you guys are in different firms or larger firms, and we've been talking about graduates and employment and things like that, what is your firm's and Cormac, you mentioned this a few moments ago about, or maybe it was Evan, about hiring the best students out there. What do you guys look for? What do your firms look for when you're at these jobs fairs and you're seeing students work? What stands out to you guys when you see that?
I can tell you right off the bat, there's two things. The first one is passion for architecture. There's too many students who have been either beat down by the system of studio, just they're brain dead because they've worked so hard that they've just shown up to do the job fair, and they just kind of mindlessly thumb through their 50-page book. Then there's the other ones who have pared it down. Here's my 3 best projects, and here's what I did with this one, and here's what I did with this one, and this one shows my skills that I can do here. And that passion that comes through, you can just see it in them. That's kind of the first thing that I would look for in a student applying. And the other thing is, how are they going to fit in with our team? How much diversity do they add? What different perspectives could they bring to our team? And would they fit? Would they be a good fit? And could they even possibly lead us in another direction? Because the worst situation for both sides of that to be in is if somebody doesn't fit with the team, with the rest of the team. It's not practical. Everybody's angry all the time.
Yeah, and I'll second both of the things that Evan looks for. Definitely a passion for architecture. Now, I've actually been at several firms, and I've actually sat in, and even with when I was solo, we looked at each person kind of differently and what they bring to the table, just like Evan was saying. But the different firms, depending on what they do and what they're really needing, sometimes they'll actually choose somebody who may be less talented, and I think everybody who makes it through architecture school has got, some great talent to them, and maybe some people aren't like the most stellar of designers, but they bring, the more analytical, technical, side of things. And maybe that's exactly what the firm is looking for at that point in time. And then there's others that we really need, to kind of up our game in design. So we'll take a chance on, somebody new who's going to kind of force the questions and the blood and, and maybe even the ego of the existing team to kind of push the design to become better. Because I've been on ones that are, at certain firms that they're really, really strong in design. And so a lot of times they tended to keep the design, with a certain few people. And all they really wanted was somebody who to execute their designs. And then, just the opposite was, we're really good technical, design, we're a really good technical firm that does really good, competent buildings, but we just need to get better in our design. So, it's almost a kind of a,
an a la carte. It's not really an a la carte type thing. It's a, it all depends on the project type. And in fact, if we are, like in the particular firm I'm at now, we do look for a lot of people who've got, practical experience, are able to use things like BIM. Revit is a plus. And stuff like that. And I'm going to say that again to any student who's listening. Revit is not a plus. Revit is a must.
Yeah, I think that one thing that I would even add is if somebody has a skill that is a little more fringe, that not, especially the people that we already have don't have that skill, that's a really great benefit, I think. If somebody really has a specialty in building skins, for instance, and they could really bring something to the table, I think that that's a huge bonus because they have something they can teach other people. And I like to look for people who have something to teach other people.
Well, one of the things I discovered recently, attending a local practice forum at my local AIA office, was, I should say, the thing I took away from that experience was that a lot of people that, or the hiring people at some of these firms that were represented at this forum, said they get hundreds and hundreds of resumes all the time. And, they may hold on to some, but honestly, they don't really have time to go through them all, which is sad. I mean, I'm sure there's excellent candidates in there, but they're just flooded with so many different things, or so many of them that they can't go through them all. But they pointed out a couple of things that were interesting. One was their cover letter, and really kind of explaining in their cover letter how they could benefit that firm. And that kind of goes along with what you guys are both saying, which is, you guys at each firm is looking for a certain set of skills or a certain person to fit in to that firm. And so what I took away from that meeting was, really do your homework on a particular firm, and find out maybe what their needs are. Use your social networks to find out if you know somebody that works there, or somebody's a friend of a friend that might work there, that you can, discover what they might need and what the culture of the firm is. And you can kind of tailor that cover letter to kind of match that, or to express what your skills are and how they might fit and what you can bring to the table for that firm.
I totally agree.
Because that's what's going to get you hired at that firm. And so really, instead of taking the shotgun approach to just randomly send out resumes because a firm is looking for somebody. I see a lot of job postings, and even for myself, I see these job postings and I go, well, I could send them a resume, but it's just going to go into a file with, a whole lot of other people. And there's really nothing for me to maybe make myself stand out. And so what the other thing that I took away was, I need to actually take a step back as somebody who's, maybe looking for to work in another firm, and say, what firms out there are doing the work that I can help them with and that I want to do. And then really maybe target that firm, regardless of whether they're hiring. In fact, several of the people at that forum said, we may not be hiring, but if we see somebody that's passionate about our firm, that knows about our firm, that wants to do the type of work we're doing, we'll probably talk to them. And, we may not hire them right away, but we're aware of them. You keep, you go to social events, either at the local AIA office or, other types of events where these people might be, and you go and you meet with them, housing tours, go on the housing tour, meet the architect if they're there that designed that house, or building.
Well, yeah, and this comes back to passion for architecture.
Talk to them,
right? You have to be
absolutely
embedded in your career, and it doesn't mean just going to work every day. It's the other stuff that you do, how you live your life. I mean, that to me is something that I want to know about people. I mean, how much do you like architecture? I mean, do you go and find buildings and sneak into them and find the security guard and say, man, I love this building. Do you mind if I walk around? I just found a building here in my hometown. My wife and I, we went up to the door, and it hasn't opened yet. And we're just poking around the outside, looking in the windows. And there's a guy driving a Bobcat tractor around. And he turns off the tractor and comes over, and he's like, hey, I've got a key. Do you want to go in and look around? And turns out he's the architect. And I just thought that was the coolest happenstance thing that could have possibly happened, but man, it was like, what a great experience to just be poking through a window because I'm interested in this building, and the architect's there and says, hey, let me show you around. You guys can just go in and walk around. If you have any questions, let me know. I just thought that was the coolest thing.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes I'll even go so far as to, and hope some of those people aren't listening, but I'll just walk to a construction site, have my hard hat in hand, and start walking around like I belong there, just to kind of peek through and, just kind of really see what's going on, what other people are doing and stuff like that. Just, because we shape some of our vacations or some of our little day trips around buildings.
Yep.
And, I think my kids are probably, like well over the, hey, we're going to go drive down to the closest Frank Lloyd Wright, house and just kind of tour around in it, just because I want to see it, or, some historical house or things like that. But, it's just, that's kind of how I live is, eat, sleep, breathe it.
And if you can talk to the contractor, that's even better. I mean, when I was working on a project in a mall that was being built, and during my lunch break one day, we were over there installing some stuff because we were doing design build. I walked down to the Apple store that was under construction, and I just walked up, just like you said, Cormac. I had my hard hat on. I just walked up like I belong there. And the contractor, the lead guy, the soup, was there, and he said, hey, what's going on? And I said, oh man, I'm just a huge fan. I just wanted to poke around and see. And he took me on an hour-long tour, showing me the proprietary ceiling system, and it was awesome. And he was just a super down-to-earth, cool guy. And because I had the guts to just walk up and act like I belonged there, he treated me like I was. I mean, it was very cool.
Well, architects and probably the construction managers on projects we like to talk about ourselves and what we do. And, so if you're in that situation and you get an opportunity to talk to them, just ask questions.
Yep.
And, most likely, don't talk about yourself. Just ask them a question, shut up, and just let them go, because they'll likely like your experience. You got walked around for an hour. He probably showed you all the things that, you would never see otherwise. Right. And, we like to talk about what we've done and what's successful, and, or, if you go to a construction site like that, you're probably likely to learn about all the things that didn't maybe go right. And, learning about those can be even more valuable than learning about the things that went right.
And
exactly.
One of the other cool things was that's the same Apple store that I ended up working in, the day that it opened, which was only a few months later. And so I kind of had this insider knowledge, which is something that I try to instill in my clients as we are doing these giant projects for them. Is I like to instill them with insider knowledge so that they have stories to tell other people that come into their building, and then that helps spread the architecture love around. You know what I mean? It just makes it more interesting for people if there's a story. And I think we talked about that last time as well. And the other thing is, just to bring it back around to the resume thing that you were talking about, Neil, where you're one of hundreds. I can't overstate the necessity to design your resume. Too many people use a stupid Microsoft template, and that is an easy way to stand out. And I don't mean over design it, but I mean design it. And one thing that I'm a huge proponent of is just design everything. You need to pass over it with a fine-tooth comb, and you need to design it. Font choice matters. I don't know if you guys saw, but you see that the Vatican, because the Pope retired, they put out a book, and it was all in Comic Sans.
Oh my God!
Really?
Yeah.
I
mean, talk about absolute craziness. But I see resumes come in Comic Sans, and it's like, what are you thinking? Like, again, back to Neil's point, do your research.
But doesn't that look architectural,
Oh my
Comic
gosh,
Sans?
Okay, so Evan, you mentioned on the last episode your distaste for architectural fonts on the drawings.
This is way bigger. I see Comic Sans around, and it's like,
oh no, but what about architectural font on your resume?
Oh yeah, nope.
No. Okay.
Well, let me ask you this. So, what are you talking about?
I'm looking at
when you
my
say-
resume right now.
What do you mean when you say architectural
Like
font?
a
Because
hand-lettered
actually-
looking font that's architectural.
Okay. Because actually, I went out, yes, because I'm this much of a nerd, and bought a copy of the Neutra font.
Yeah. Oh, that's
I
a
don't know if-
beautiful font.
and-
Yeah.
Absolutely
Neutra
beautiful font.
face,
And I actually use that on my resume. And the one thing is that I know that I'm going to be probably one of the only people, if sending my resume off to somebody using that typeface.
Well, and
And,
that you
and it's so
paid for
clean.
that. I mean, first of all, good on you for doing that. But it is a work of art, and those people who designed that font deserve to be paid for that. I mean, and it is absolute. I use it in my 3D modeling all the time for building signage and addresses because it's so nice looking.
Oh, it's beautiful and it's clean. It's such a very crisp and just fantastic font. And I mean, yeah, there's the default like Helvetica for Mac or Arial for PCs and stuff like that, which are fine and clean, way to go. And if you're going to use that, I definitely agree with you. Design your resume. Make it stand out. Don't make it, I see these people who send their resume and they've got these underlays of images and sketches and stuff like that.
And it's a mess.
That's actually over-designed because now it becomes so blurry and so muddy that you really don't know what kind of message that you're, sending off to them. Make it clean, make it crisp, make it concise, but have it stand out enough where it's as you're flipping through each of them, and you will see that one that just stands out, and because it's designed, it was cared for, this person really wants the job.
Yeah, that's good advice.
What about so I actually kind of like the topic of resumes and in job hunting and stuff like that because we probably have done it recently. When I moved up here from Florida to DC, I went through the whole effort, and there were certain things that I wanted to highlight on my resume that I really wanted to see each of these firms, and I handpicked all of the firms that I was looking for. I didn't want to just blanket a bunch of people. I really just wanted to find the firms that I really wanted to work for. Not thinking to myself that, here's, I'm in the thick of one of the worst recessions, especially in our profession. The job market is, crashed. The housing market has crashed. The construction industry has crashed. I'm now out of business. How am I going to stand out amongst the thousands of people who are probably looking for a job? We're talking about, the fonts, and we're talking about the designing of the thing. I mean, what do you guys think is, that essential item on a resume that's really going to, show them that you're the one, and it all depends on, like which level you're going for, whether or not you're, applying for a project management job or, a project architect job or an intern. Obviously there's going to be a variety of, work experience and stuff. And I'm not really talking about that, but, Evan, because you said that you've like flipped through, the resumes and stuff. I mean, what makes it stand out the most? What does what is the good resume that kind of pops out to you?
I typically meet with people in person, and so to me, it's more about the portfolio than it is about the resume. But they go hand in hand. I mean,
Yeah.
At our firm, you submit everything all at the same time. But again, that the design of the portfolio, you're limiting it to the best work, not all of the work that you've done, but your best work. And you still have to design the page. It's got to be laid out. There's got to be white space. It's got to pop. It's got to be clean. It's those things that you're talking about. There's a flow from page to page. But it really shows a passion for architecture, and attention to detail is typically the things that I'm looking for.
So, Evan, I was going to ask, you mentioned portfolio. How often, since you're in an office that's doing this, how often do you see people coming in with printed material, or is it something that would look poorly on somebody if they just came in with an iPad and, had something either in a slide format or photographs or however it's presented? But what if it was presented on an iPad, for instance?
That's one of the, we're definitely seeing a trend that way. I'm a huge proponent of technology anyway, so I get it. I think it is still, and we collect PDFs, but I will say that the more memorable ones have a leave behind of some kind. Right. And I think if you really want to stay top of mind to a potential hirer, you want to have something that you leave in their hand. And yeah, you don't know what's going to happen with it, but I've had students follow up with a postcard that they designed, and I will put it on a wall with a magnet, or I'll pin it up, because number one, it reminds me of them and the extra effort that they went through, because they wrote me a note and said, thanks for meeting with me and such, but it's also a nice little piece of art, and there's a connection there. If there's any way that you can create a connection, I think that's it. I think that's harder to do with the digital presentation, but I also like the interactivity of that. So I think it totally works. I think you still need to either have a leave behind or some kind of a follow-up that is something physical that you can leave with the person.
Yeah. And I'm not, asking, are you guys, currently looking or anything, but what does your resume look like right now? I mean, because for example, mine, I have, my resume that I've pretty much kind of designed out as a, kind of an interesting 2-column thing. And so what I've got is I've got a resume, which is just the straight out, here's my work experience, here's, whether or not I've got any awards or publications, things that I want to highlight, to a potential hire, in a potential employer. Then I actually have a 5-page almost cut sheet of my 5 best projects that I've done, that both talk about, give you a synopsis of the project, give you some of the, glamour shots of the project, explain the role and things like that. Because, I would be looking for, a project management position. And no, if my bosses are listening, I am not looking for a new job. I am just saying that my, the resume that you guys got when I was hired there, that's a disclaimer, that was, the cover, the resume, the kind of like 5 project highlight, and then I did a single page project list of projects, and like the basically with a real quick, here, I've got educational experience. Here's a list of, current projects that I've done. I've got residential experience. Here's a list of current projects that I've done, things like that.
I think that's all great stuff. And I think that it's also important that you kind of say what you did on those projects, because architecture is never a singular authorship, at least not on these types of projects. And so you need to be honest and say, yeah, I spent 9 months on curtain wall on this project, or I spent 6 months in detailing, or, I was in charge of initial schematic design. I mean, there's whatever it is, you should probably say such. I think that's a really important piece of it. And I think, You know what's really interesting? What popped into my mind when you asked that question was, I don't know that I do have a physical resume, but it's old. I kind of take the opportunity to redesign or retool it every time,
right,
from scratch. Right. But you know where I keep all my information current is just on LinkedIn.
Yeah. You know, I do that, and then as part of my LinkedIn profile, I have a Behance. It's kind of like just a little digital portfolio. You can scroll down on the LinkedIn, and there's like a link to a online portfolio that kind of highlight.
You just have to.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, actually, I think that's becoming more important, and I am actually a culprit of this. I don't actually have a physical, CormacPhalen.com type, website, but I do have an online presence that shows my, some of my highlighted work.
Do you want to buy CormacPhalen.com? Because I own it.
Yeah, do you?
If you want to buy it off me, it's $1,000.
How much would you? Yeah, $1,000 for each letter.
Right.
Yeah.
How do I get in on that deal?
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's becoming incredibly important. And actually, Evan, to speak to what you were saying, I definitely believe wholeheartedly that a leave behind is incredibly important. But coming in with and it goes back to what job are you trying to land? Are you trying to land a project manager, project architect, intern architect type project? To kind of will tell you exactly what you should be bringing. Because obviously, if you're a recent graduate, you're not going to be walking in with a couple of sets of documents, half-size sets of documents to kind of show your technical knowledge and your ability, to be able to put together a set of documents. So you're going to tailor your leave behind on exactly what you're going to be bringing to the table. But I really like the idea, and I did this. I actually brought in all sorts of things. I came in with, when I was moving up here to DC, and I was sitting in those offices. I had my laptop with me because that's what it was at the time. We didn't have, iPads and things like that. But, I wanted to show them that not only was I able to put together a set of documents, I was able to design, but I also understood the technology to put them all together, and be able to present them in a professional manner. And that's the things that people are looking for is how do you understand both the latest technology, but also, can you draw? It goes from one end of the spectrum to the other. And it's just what you really honestly will be able to bring to the table.
The art of sketching is really fallen off, I've noticed. It's all digital, and man, that sucks.
And you know that we are going to talk about that often.
The other for sure, because it's super important, right? It's a
yes,
yeah. But I would also add that there's one of the most important things to look for when you're hiring somebody too is you want to get a sense of what they're all about. Some sense of their sense of humor. What do they like besides architecture? Because if someone is so hardcore into architecture, there's some bad aspects to that as well, right? So what do you do outside of architecture? Something that really stood out to me was when I was teaching at Cal Poly was, I'd get students turning in final projects, and this one guy, he was just a wise ass all the time, and he was so funny, and it's obviously one of the things I appreciated about him. But he would have little call-outs in his drawings that were complete nonsense and just humorous. And I thought, that's totally him. And I feel like if I can get a sense of who you are, because like I said, I want to find somebody who's a fit for the team. You don't want the job if you're not a fit for the team. If it's going to be painful for you, and you probably won't last that long if you're not a good fit. And so it's just as important for you to find a good team to fit into as it is for that team to find somebody else to add into it. So I think it's good to show who you are besides the architect in this stuff as well. And so I could imagine your stuff probably had a lot of little hand sketches and doodles and stuff in it too.
Yeah, and the passion of like photography and things like that. I mean, I really personalized them. Because you're right. You're not just hiring a tool to get a
No,
job
you're
done.
hiring an artist.
You're hiring a person. Yeah, you're hiring a person. You want to know what that person's all about, what makes them tick, what makes them enjoy. Because even in then, because you were talking about, you've got to work within the team and understanding how they fit, and even kind of some of their little peculiarities of does this what kind of sets this guy off a little bit. You may not be able to weed all that stuff out in an interview, but you kind of get to understand, because a lot of times interviews, as we all know, can be some of the most stressful things. It's just like, why did you get into architecture? I don't know, but it's how they kind of respond to just the pressure of a simple interview. If they feel relaxed and comfortable with you and stuff like that, those are usually the people who will start to stand out more so than the people who are in there and they're really nervous and they want to make sure that they say the right thing and are just kind of so that kind of leads into you will
go ahead.
I was going to say that Evan, you were talking about that you go to a lot of the I guess the local colleges job fairs and things like that. Any student who's listening to us, go to those. Even if you're not looking for a job,
if you can practice, you want to practice interviewing. Practice
interviewing. Because when you really are looking for a job, the more comfortable you are with what you're going to say, with who you are, how you carry yourself, and on and on and on, that will be extraordinarily important. It's a tool that you really can't teach. You just have to practice.
Yeah, and I really like it when candidates ask good questions back. They're not just, it's not all about their responses, but it's also about what do they want to know about you that they don't know. I think that's an architect's job, especially when dealing with clients, is how to ask the right questions and how to ask good questions so that you get the kind of information you need. And so, like I said, it's just as important for you when you're doing an interview to find out if that company is a right fit for you as it is the other way around. And I think that's one way to do it. It's a really good way to do it.
I think that's going to let you stand out as well, because it's a way to make yourself, see how much homework has this person done, either on us as a firm or just thinking about what they want to do in their job that they're working, for that firm. And so by asking those questions, you're going to make yourself, more memorable. Never have an interview go, well, do you have anything for us? And you're like, no. Oh, okay. All right. Well, it'll probably be the last time we talk then.
Right.
Because that's not going to help you. But I think ultimately, what I'm hearing from both of you guys is just be yourself. And certainly by practicing and going to those job fairs and having multiple interviews, whether you get the jobs or not, adds to that experience and that level of comfort. You're never going to be totally comfortable with sitting down to be interviewed. But the more relaxed you are, I think, shows a certain level of confidence.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of job interviews in the last 15 years, and every single one that I've gone into, I've gotten the job. And there's definitely a huge benefit to being comfortable and having that confidence in yourself, that you're portraying exactly who you are. And because if you're not, everyone's going to find out sometime. And again, you have to be the right fit, and they have to be the right fit for you.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So let's wrap this thing up. I think this was a great topic, and I hope a lot of people get stuff out of it. All of the stuff that we've talked about today on the podcast can be, you'll find all the links on our website at archispeakpodcast.com, and click on the episodes tab, and this is episode number 4. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Archispeak. That's ARCHISPK. And you can follow me on Twitter at eTroxel, ETROXEL.
you can follow me at NPANN. And I'd also like to add that we launched a Facebook page this week as well, which you can find at facebook.com/ArcaSpeak podcast, all written out just like our website address.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And please join in the conversation either on our website or on Twitter or there.
Yes, and you can find me at Archetype on Twitter at Archetype, and that's ARCH_TYPE.
All right. I'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
I joined the choir to sing. They're all competing for some other thing. I joined the choir to sing. I joined the choir to sing. They're all competing for some other thing. I joined the choir to sing. Say I eat, breathe the race, my feet, my face, chase the one thing, honey.